There are a lot of enemies in Pikmin 4. I'm Keefy with One Up Binge, and today we're ranking all those enemies from weak to powerful. Just to clarify, for this video we're sticking to the general enemies and not the big boss battles. If you want to see those ranked, check out our Pikmin 4 bosses weak to powerful video. We'll be taking into account the enemy's attack power, defense, and overall health collectively. If an enemy has significantly high health and defense, its position will be lowered to near the bottom of the list if it can't directly harm the player nor Pikmin. With that out of the way, let's start with the weakest enemy and work our way up to the most powerful. We're starting things off with the collective ranking of the red, white, and yellow Spectralids and the Honeywisp. We're ranking all these enemies together as not only do they have the lowest amount of health out of any creatures in the game, but they do not attack the Pikmin in any way, shape, or form. The Spectralids and the Honeywisp basically exist to fly through the air and be attacked by the Pikmin. The red Spectralids drop Ultra Spicy Spray, the white ones drop nothing, and the yellow ones, along with the Honeywisp, drop Nectar. So basically these enemies are glorified item drops. As weak as the Honeywisp and Spectralids are, the Mitites don't fare a whole lot better. These things share the honor of having the lowest amount of health in the game, and also being enemies that can't attack the player nor Pikmin. What they can do is cause a Pikmin and Oatchi to run around in a panic, leaving them open to harm from other creatures or hazards. Two more enemies that have absolutely no attack power whatsoever are the Skitterleaf and the female Sheargrub. The Skitterleaves camouflage themselves as regular leaves before running around in a panic upon seeing the player. The female Sheargrub chases the player around, but does not directly harm them nor the Pikmin in any way. The only reason we're ranking these things slightly above our previous entries is because they do have slightly more health, even though it's still among the lowest out of any creatures in the game. The Skitterleaf drops a leaf which will produce a single Pikmin seed, and the female Sheargrub will produce a single drop of Sparklium, neither of which are that important to collect. Thus, they mostly serve as mere distractions. Swimming in next is the Waldpole. The Waldpoles are harmless for the most part and don't attack the Pikmin. Their biggest advantage is their high speed, making them hard to attack even with their low health wheel. When the Pikmin attack the Waldpole, it can shake them off, which causes the Pikmin to potentially lose their petals. The Iridescent Flint Beetle crawls in next. Another glorified item provider, the Iridescent Flint Beetle runs around aimlessly, not attacking the Pikmin in any way, shape, or form. If the Pikmin are on the ground though, they cannot attack it. The only course of action to take care of these creatures is to throw a Pikmin on their back, which flips them over and exposes their weak point. The Iridescent Flint Beetle will drop items like pellets or spray drops, which can be useful. Really, their protective shell is the only reason they rank higher than the previous creatures. The Iridescent Glint Beetle is up next. There's not much to say with this entry, as everything we said about the Iridescent Flint Beetle applies to its golden counterpart. It crawls around at high speeds without harming the Pikmin, but will drop items if the Pikmin are thrown on its back. The only difference with the Iridescent Glint Beetle is that its health is much higher and will drop more useful items, giving an added incentive for the player to knock items out of it. Waddling in next is Waddlepus. A purple octopus type creature, the Waddlepus is a generally calm enemy that won't go after the player nor Pikmin unless they wake it up by entering its vicinity. If its slumber is disturbed, the Waddlepus will inflate itself and follow the player before exhaling bubbles from its pores. These bubbles are not much more than a minor nuisance and will only serve as a way to slow the player down. The Waddlepus's high health does indicate they will take time to defeat, which can be a problem in certain circumstances, particularly Dandori challenges. Some enemies protect themselves while others have a tough exterior from the get-go. The latter is the case with the miniature Snootwhacker. This is an enemy that doesn't physically attack the Pikmin, preferring to blow them back using its long snout, or snoot. Due to its thick skin, the miniature Snootwhacker can't be attacked by normal means. The only way to stun it is by ramming the miniature Snootwhacker with Oatchi or blowing it up with a bomb rock. Doing this reveals a miniature Snootwhacker's belly, which can be attacked by the Pikmin. Still, if you don't have your trusted dog or the right items with you, then the miniature Snootwhacker is pretty much invulnerable. Cooling down the next spot is the Arctic Cannon Larva. The infant version of the Arctic Cannon Beetle boss, the Arctic Cannon Larvae hides in a hole and pops out to shoot snowballs at the player. In certain situations, the Arctic Cannon Larvae won't hide at all, preferring to stay above ground and spit an endless barrage of snowballs around the area. The snowballs they shoot are quite big and fast, but they cannot harm the player nor Pikmin. Instead, these snowballs mostly serve as minor nuisances, picking up whomever is caught in it until it explodes from hitting something else. The Arctic Cannon Larvae do have high health and can be quite the inconvenience, but since they aren't particularly dangerous, we can't rank them as very powerful. Diving in next is the Swooping Snitch Bug. One of the most well-known annoyances which have appeared in every game, the Swooping Snitch Bug flies around the map and snatches Pikmin from the ground. It then flies around for a bit longer before throwing the Pikmin down with such force that it plants them again. While not harmful, the Swooping Snitch Bug can occasionally throw the Pikmin into hazards or other enemies, which can cause some issues. The other side of the coin is that the replanted Pikmin can have their leaves or buds change into flowers if the player is patient enough, so the Swooping Snitch Bug can actually be helpful in its own right. You don't have to be airborne to slam Pikmin into the ground though, as evidenced by the Mamuta, a large buff creature that likes to show off its strength. The Mamuta was a boss in the first Pikmin game before being downgraded to a regular enemy in the the second. The Mamuta will walk around and slam Pikmin into the ground with its fist. This isn't harmful, and like the swooping snitch bug's attacks, it can be helpful if the player waits long enough for certain Pikmin to bloom. The Mamuta does have relatively high health, but since it's more of an obstacle than a threat, we really can't rank it high in terms of power. Another airborne enemy that's less helpful when it comes to making Pikmin bloom is the Withering Blowhog. This creature is essentially a large balloon that chases a Pikmin around to blow on them. While not harmful to the Pikmin directly, the Withering Blowhog's breath can wilt their flowers into buds. While not a dangerous creature, the Withering Blowhog can be quite detrimental to the player's army. Its high health does add to their nuisance level too. Now, what would you get if the Withering Blowhog was a little bit bigger, spikier, and had higher health? The Puffy Blowhog, of course. This enemy is quite similar to the previous one, but it does have a few attributes that make it stand out. Firstly, the Puffy Blowhog's breath is not only powerful enough to wilt flowers, but also knock back the Pikmin and the player. This can be quite the issue if the Puffy Blowhog is surrounded by enemies, hazards, or bottomless pits on certain cave levels. On top of that, the Puffy Blowhog has some of the highest health out of any creature in the game, giving it ample time to cause issues with its strong breath. Popping into the next spot is the Bulborb Larva. This creature is tied at the bottom of the health wheel along with the Spectralids, Honeywisp, and Mytite. The difference here is that the Bulborb Larva can actually attack, making them the first genuinely harmful enemy on our countdown. The Bulborb Larva are often seen popping out of Empress Bulblax during your boss fights. While the Bulborb Larva aren't that harmful individually, they can be a nuisance if Empress Bulblax produces enough of them to swarm the player. Good thing Empress Bulblax has no problem rolling over on her own offspring, giving an easy opportunity to eliminate them in mass quantity. Skating in next is Skeeter Skate. These bizarre enemies skate on liquid surfaces and shoot water at the player and their Pikmin. It's another enemy with a very low health wheel and low attack efficiency. Not only does it take a long time for the Skeeter Skate to charge up its shot, but considering they shoot water, their attack is useless against blue Pikmin. Also, considering they reside on the surfaces of water, you're more likely to have blue Pikmin around a Skeeter Skate than any other type. Now we get to a double ranking of the male Sheer Grub and the Sheer Flea. Despite ranking together, being small bugs and having sheer in their name, the male Sheer Grub and Sheer Flea are from different families, so much like Buster and Babs Bunny, there's no relation. The male Sheer Grub has a very similar movement pattern as its female counterpart, with the one difference being they will actually eat the Pikmin. The Sheer Flea is similar, except they won't eat the Pikmin right away, preferring to jump to safety before devouring their prey. The male Sheer Grub and Sheer Flea can be a little dangerous if found in mass quantities due to their ability to swarm the player, but due to their low health, they won't provide much of an obstacle for long. The Puckering Blino washes up next. Much like the Woldpole, the Puckering Blino is a small but speedy aquatic creature that can be found swimming around. Unlike the Woldpole, the Puckering Blino will attack the Pikmin even if they do take their time in eating them. Puckering Blinos often swim in groups of 3 or more, so while they're not that harmful on their own, it can lead to some multitasking for the player to avoid losing their army. Regardless, the Puckering Blino has low health and gives the player time to fight back, so we can't rank them too high in the power department overall. From the water to the sky, the Sheerwig flies in next. This creature is essentially a male Sheer Grub, but with wings and slightly more aggression. Swooping down to eat the Pikmin, the Sheerwig's flying ability does make it potentially harder to attack, even though throwing one Pikmin onto them is enough to defeat them. Their evasive nature does earn them some brownie points over their grounded family members, and the fact that they can slightly heal themselves if airborne again does add to their power level. Still, it's unlikely they'll get that far due to their low health, which is why they're closer to the bottom of the list. Camouflage in the next spot is the Desiccated Skitterleaf. This enemy is essentially the same as the regular Skitterleaf, except it has slightly more health, hides under a different colored leaf, and is actually harmful to the Pikmin. The Desiccated Skitterleaf is very fast, both in its on-ground movement and its devouring of the Pikmin, which it can do in a split second. This does make them an enemy that the player will want to deal with very quickly, even if its low health will prevent them from being truly powerful. The previous enemy used camouflage, but there's no mistaking the Dwarf Bulborb, which is one of the most recognizable creatures in the series. The younger versions of the fully grown Bulborb, the Dwarf Bulborb is essentially the Goomba of the Pikmin series, being an instantly recognizable, weaker enemy that can be harmful, but not if the player knows how to deal with them. They'll eat the Pikmin if given the chance, but they're unlikely to get that opportunity considering they can be killed by throwing one Pikmin on them or swarming them with a large army. The Dwarf Bulborb wasn't cool enough for you, huh? Well, the Dwarf Frosty Bulborb should fix that problem. These enemies operate the same as the regular Dwarf Bulborb, but with one difference, being that their back is covered with an icy substance that freezes most Pikmin on impact. The one exception to this is obviously the Ice Pikmin, who will instantly kill the Dwarf Frosty Bulborb in one hit. Even without the Ice Pikmin, the Dwarf Frosty Bulborb can be swarmed or pummeled by Ochi, making them only a bit harder to deal with than the regular Dwarf Bulborb. Their ice can also be melted by fire, which essentially makes them no different from their red-spotted counterparts at that point. Sticking with the theme, the Moldy Dwarf Bulborb infects the next spot. These are obviously similar to the Dwarf Frosty Bulborbs, but the difference being that their backs are protected by a poisonous gas rather than an icy shield. This makes them harder than the Dwarf Frosty Bulborb for 2 reasons. One, they can only only be attacked from the top by white Pikmin, which are weaker and harder to come by than ice Pikmin, and 2, their protection can't be melted off with fire like the dwarf Frosty Bulborb. We're not done yet, as the albino dwarf Bulborb and the orange dwarf Bulborb are next. The albino variant is essentially the same as the regular dwarf Bulborb, except with twice as much health and a different color palette. As such, it takes 2 Pikmin thrown on top of it for it to be defeated instead of 1. The orange dwarf Bulborb has similar stats, except it can be defeated with 1 Pikmin thrown on its back. With that said though, the orange dwarf Bulborb does have better eyesight and can detect Pikmin at a longer range, making them potentially more dangerous. Not exactly much more of a challenge than the regular dwarf Bulborb, but these two do deserve to be ranked higher in the power department for those reasons. Moving back to the ocean, but staying in the Grubdog family, next we're talking about the Water Dumple. A series mainstay from the first game, the Water Dumple is basically the aquatic version of the albino dwarf Bulborb with similar movement and attack range. The biggest difference is that, due to being shellfish, the Water Dumples have harder exteriors, meaning they can't be defeated by a few Pikmin being thrown on their backs. Unless we're talking about the purple Pikmin, of course. Swarming still works though, so the Water Dumple shouldn't be too hard to take care of as long as you have a significant amount of Pikmin with you. Finally, stepping out of Grubdog territory, let's talk about the Downy Snagret. These birds are the newly introduced child versions of the burrowing Snagret boss, which has been a mainstay ever since the first game. The Downy Snagret hops around on one foot and pecks at the Pikmin, somewhat similarly to the pileated or pileated Snagret from Pikmin 2. Downy Snagrets will sometimes hide in nectar eggs, waiting for an opportunity for the Pikmin to release them. Next are the Moldy Slooch and the Pyroclasmic Slooch. These sluggish creatures are slow both in their movements and their attacks, meaning they wouldn't be much of a problem at all if not for their elemental qualities. The Moldy Slooch is protected by the same toxic gas as the Moldy Dwarf Bulborb, while the Pyroclasmic Slooch is protected by fire. This indicates that the only Pikmin that can attack them are the white or red Pikmin, depending on which variant you encounter. Keeping with the elemental theme, up next is a collective ranking of the Anode Dweevil, Fiery Dweevil, Hydro Dweevil, Ice-Blown Dweevil, and Venom Dweevil. These elemental spider-like creatures are of the exact same health and attack power, with the only difference being their color and what they shoot out at the Pikmin army. These attacks will harm all the Pikmin except the one that's invulnerable to that element, and even then, the player can use their whistle to cure the Pikmin if they're fast enough. Due to the somewhat low health of these Dweevils though, they may not even get the opportunity to attack if the player is good at offense and defense. While we're talking about enemies with low defense, the Scutterchuck at least had the bright idea of finding something to protect itself with. These creatures hide under rocks and mostly stay there until the player comes in close contact with said rock. Once they do, the Scutterchuck will throw the rock at the player before frantically crawling toward another rock for cover. The rocks they can use can be easily destroyed by rock Pikmin, and a Scutterchuck only requires 1 Pikmin thrown on it to be defeated. Swarming also works depending on the situation, so the Scutterchucks, despite their best efforts, aren't that well defended, all things considered. Poking our way back into aquatic territory, let's talk about the Prickle Puff. The Prickle Puffs swim around and will use the spikes on their face to stab at enemies who are nearby. The Prickle Puff's spikes do allow them to impale multiple Pikmin at once, which can make them somewhat dangerous. Rock Pikmin are immune to spikes, but considering they can't swim, it's more likely than not the blue Pikmin will be the ones facing the Prickle Puff. Whatever the case, make sure to be on guard while facing these spiky fish. Now let's finally get to the most powerful out of the juvenile Bulborbs, that being the Dwarf Bulbear. These creatures are much stronger and more aggressive than the other Dwarf Bulborbs, with much higher health and stronger backs. Throwing Pikmin on top of the Dwarf Bulbear is not the foolproof plan that it would be with other smaller Bulborbs, although sending a swarm of Pikmin their way is still a very effective method. The Dwarf Bulbears will eat the Pikmin at a faster rate and even protect its adult version if the player focuses their effort on them. Now let's talk about the Beetle family again, this time being the Anode Beetle. Much like the Flint Beetle or the Glint Beetle, the Anode Beetle is protected by an outer shell and can only be defeated by flipping it on its back. Unlike with the two aforementioned versions, the Anode Beetle can actually attack the Pikmin and player with electricity. The Anode Beetle does take time to charge its attack, giving more than enough time for the player to avoid it or flip it over if you're fast enough. If you have yellow Pikmin in your army, then the Anode Beetle is pretty much screwed. But you know what's more dangerous than an electric beetle? A farting beetle, as Doodlebug proves. These creatures are very similar to that of the iridescent Flint Beetle in that they scurry around at a very high speed and must be flipped over by throwing a Pikmin on their back. The two key differences being that the Doodlebug has more health and can harm the Pikmin by farting in their general direction. These farts emit a toxic gas which is harmful to all except the white Pikmin, making them ideal to take out these gassy bugs. The Dweevils may have been the first spider-like creatures we covered, but the Arachnode far outdoes them in the power department. environment. Usually found hanging out on webs, the Arachnode is probably the creature in the Pikmin series that acts most like a real spider. The Arachnode essentially waits for creatures to get caught in its web before going to devour them. This creature can be a problem, especially if you have winged Pikmin and their resting position is out of reach, but the Arachnode can be taken out pretty easily by rock Pikmin if you brought them. Sidestepping into the next spot is the Aristocrab Offspring. As its name would imply, this creature is a smaller version of a bigger enemy who we'll get to a little bit later. The Aristocrab Offspring has two main attacks, those being blowing bubbles and swiping with its larger claw. The bubble attack is harmless toward the player and mostly serves as an inconvenience. The swipe attack will catch the Pikmin before the Aristocrab Offspring eats them. This creature will occasionally hide underground waiting to ambush the player, so be on the lookout. Another new enemy to Pikmin 4 is the Sun Squish, a squishy enemy that looks like a fried egg with eyes. The Sun Squish is another deceitful enemy that, much like the Downy Snagret, can often be found hiding in nectar eggs. A slow enemy, the Sun Squish will telegraph both its movement and attacks before they happen, giving the player more than enough time to react. If the Sun Squish is successful, it'll land on the Pikmin and digest them with its body. The Sun Squish's slow movement won't make it that much of a threat, although its somewhat high health and ability to shake Pikmin off of it makes it an enemy that you do have to put effort into defeating. The Sun Squish hides in an egg, but most enemies hide underground, as the Joustmite will tell you. Okay, well, hiding is a loose term, as the Joustmite sticks half its body out of the ground, making it pretty easy to detect if you're paying any attention. That might make it sound like these creatures aren't that efficient, but the Joustmite can attack very quickly with its sharp tongue. The Joustmite's also covered with a protective shell, with its only weakness being on its back. Due to its attack being on its front and weak point being on its back, the Joustmite really isn't that hard to avoid if you're playing offensively, especially if you have rock Pikmin, which are completely immune to its attacks. Another enemy that knows how to protect itself is the Gildamandwii, a smaller version of the Gildamander boss. The Gildamandwii crawls around on all fours, protecting its back with pieces of fake gold. It will attack the Pikmin on sight unless the player manages to knock the gold bits off of its back. Doing this will shift the Gildamandwii's efforts to retrieving said pieces and then throwing them onto its back again. If any of the Pikmin are attacking the fake gold on the ground, the Gildamandwii will eat them up in the process. Some enemies reside in the ground and others take to the sky, but the Flighty Joustmite asks the question, why not both? The Flighty Joustmite is very similar to the regular Joustmite with the addition of wings and a larger health wheel. The gift of flight does make these enemies harder to deal with, as they must be knocked down by Pikmin before Oatchi can stun them or the army can swarm them. The Flighty Joustmite is far from a pushover, even if its camouflage does leave a lot to be desired. You're not fooling anyone sticking out of the ground like that, buddy. The Bearded Amp Rat gallops in next. This shaggy rodent enemy runs around with two primary attacks, those being eating and electrocuting the Pikmin. Since the yellow Pikmin are immune to electricity, they're safe from that attack, but the Bearded Amp Rat can still resort to eating them, which it will do if it shakes them off of its body. The Bearded Amp Rat has somewhat high health, and considering yellow Pikmin aren't exactly the strongest Pikmin around, a duel with one or more of these things could prove to be a bit of a hassle. Best course of action is to stun them with Oatchi, and considering they like to stun Pikmin with electricity anyway, why not give them a taste of their own medicine? The Hermit Crawmad ambushes the next spot. A large lobster-like creature that hides in holes, the Hermit Crawmads have a lot going for them in terms of power. They poke their heads out of holes when they hear the player or Pikmin, and after a few seconds, the Hermit Crawmads lunge from their resting spots at high speed. The charge-up time does give opportunity for the player to avoid them, but even so, they can't hit them from the front. Like many enemies, its weak point is on its backside, which the Pikmin must attack before it retreats back into its hole. This is another case where Oatchi's stun ability is handy. Flopping in next is the Yellow Wallyhop. This round amphibian creature's attack is straightforward in concept. They jump high in the air and slam down on the ground, crushing anything beneath them. It may not sound like much, but you definitely want to steer clear of its attack, as it can eliminate dozens of Pikmin at once. Due to the Yellow Wallyhop's high health wheel, it's unlikely you'll be taking this enemy out before it gets the chance to hop, unless you're to use items. Bouldering in next is the Armored Cannon Larvae. We talked earlier about the Arctic Cannon Larvae and how it would have ranked higher if its snowballs caused any harm to the player or Pikmin. That's why its cousin, the Armored Cannon Larvae, is all the way up here. Pretty much everything we said about the Arctic Cannon Larvae mirrors this thing. It has the same attack, movement patterns, health, and defense. The only difference being that the Armored Cannon Larvae will shoot out boulders which can crush the Pikmin and player, except for rock Pikmin. This is the younger incarnation of the Armored Cannon Beetle, and while it doesn't quite reach the level of power of that boss, the Armored Cannon Larvae still provides an adequate amount of challenge in its own right. While we're on the topic of crushing Pikmin, let's talk about the Chili Hop. Basically, it's the same as the Yellow Wallyhop, except in one key way. This being the Arctic version of that enemy, not only can the Chili Hop crush enemies underneath it, but it'll release an iciness around it that'll freeze nearby Pikmin. This does make ice Pikmin ideal for facing these foes, but they can still be crushed, so it's not a foolproof plan. Floating in next is the Lesser Spotted Jelly Float. This is an enemy that's hard to rank for a few reasons. Originally appearing in Pikmin 2, the Lesser Spotted Jelly Floats are enemies that inhale Pikmin and slowly digest them unless the player takes care of them in time. That's straightforward enough, but we're ranking them much lower on this list than we would have in a Pikmin 2 countdown. This is because not only do the Lesser Spotted Jelly Floats have much lower health here than they do in that previous installment, but Ice Pikmin can freeze them, which makes them fall to the ground and shatter immediately. The Ice Pikmin's insane advantage over this enemy does cause it to drop down significantly on this list, although the Lesser Spotted Jelly Float can be a bit of a challenge without them. Finally, getting to an adult version of an enemy we previously talked about, the Mama Sheer Grub rolls into the next spot. We talked earlier about how the female Sheer Grub was one of the weakest enemies in the game due to its non-harmful nature and somewhat aimless movement patterns. The Mama Sheer Grub acts very similarly, with one key difference being its ability to crush the Pikmin with its size. The Mama Sheer Grub can be mostly ignored as it only attacks as a defense procedure, but her high health does make the Mama Sheer Grub an enemy which will take time to deal with if you do try to go head to head with her. Stealing the next spot is the Bread Bug. One of the more adorable creatures in the series, the Bread Bug looks like a Bulborb that dressed up as a pastry for Halloween. As silly as that sounds, the Bread Bug's exterior does prove to do well in protecting the creature, as throwing the Pikmin on top of it will only cause a slight bit of damage. On the other hand, the Bread Bug itself will not attack the Pikmin and instead prefers to drag objects such as treasures into their homes. We were going to put the Bread Bug in the harmless category, but if the Pikmin are dragged into their holes along with the treasure, they will die as a result. Speaking of enemies that like stealing treasures, let's talk about the Wattlequaff. A bizarre cross between a bird and an aardvark, the Wattlequaff is a feathered creature that doesn't fly, preferring instead to inhale Pikmin into its long snout. It's not just the Pikmin itself though, as the Wattlequaff will also suck in objects such as treasures and pellets, which the player will have to knock out of them. It seems these things have quite a large stomach, so don't be fooled by their small figure. They also have high health and can eat multiple Pikmin at once, thus the Wattlequaff can be a bit of a threat. Another enemy that's fond of inhaling is the Bog Swallow. Similarly to the Arctic and armored cannon larvae, the Bog Swallow hides out in holes until the player or Pikmin come around. The difference is that instead of spitting out things, the Bog Swallow sucks them in and eats them. The protagonist is also vulnerable to this attack, although Oatchi is far too big for him to be swallowed. On top of having higher health than other enemies that live in the ground, the Bog Swallow's domain is surrounded by mud, which makes the movement of the player much slower. This makes a Bog Swallow harder to stun with Oatchi's charge and increases the risk of losing Pikmin and taking damage. It's been a bit since we've had a multi-ranking, so let's talk about the Freeze Cake, Scorch Cake, and Shock Cake. These cylindrical, stony creatures can be found in many different areas where they'll flop over onto their sides and crush any Pikmin beneath them. While the top half of these enemies are made out of soft rock that can be attacked by any Pikmin, their bottom halves have different elements that can only be attacked by certain Pikmin. For this reason, the Ice Pikmin are useful for squaring off against Freeze Cake, while red should deal with the Scorch Cake and yellow are good for fighting Shock Cake. As long as you make sure Pikmin steer clear from beneath them and you don't send the wrong color attacking the wrong side, these enemies should be a cakewalk. Pun fully intended. On the topic of triple rankings, we have the Fiery Blowhog, Snowy Blowhog, and Watery Blowhog. All three of these enemies are pretty much the same in terms of health, size, and attack, with the only difference being what they shoot out of their snouts. Fiery Blowhog shoots out fire, and we feel ridiculous explaining this, so take a wild guess what the Snowy and Watery Blowhogs shoot from their snouts. The Blowhogs can also launch Pikmin off their backs with a powerful kick, which could lead to them hitting hazards or falling off cliffs in certain caves. As tough as the Fiery, Watery, and Snowy Blowhogs are, we'd say that the Tusked Blowhog, no relation, outranks them in the power department. The Tusked Blowhog will charge at its enemies and toss the player, Oatchi, and the Pikmin in the air. In the case of the Pikmin, the Tusked Blowhog can eat up to 3 of them at once if the player doesn't take care of them in time. The Tusked Blowhog's charge is quite strong, which combined with their high health, does make them quite powerful in their own right. Make sure your evasive abilities are at their best while facing Tusked Blowhogs. Now it's time for the first enemy to come to the mind of almost any Pikmin fan, that being the Bulborb. Historically speaking, the Bulborb are nocturnal creatures that'll sleep until the player directly attacks them. This remains true in Pikmin 4, although the introduction of nighttime levels allows us to encounter the Bulborb while they're at their most alert. While awake, the Bulborb doesn't act that much differently from its dwarf counterpart, with the only difference being its size and power. Keep attacking it from the back and calling Pikmin as soon as they're shaken off, and the Bulborb shouldn't be too much of an issue. If you've been paying enough attention to the list, you can probably already guess that the next spot is going to the Frosty Bulborb. Let's make this quick. The Frosty Bulborb has the same stats as the regular Bulborb, with the one exception being the ice on its back, which can be melted off by fire or attacked by ice Pikmin, and thankfully the Dwarf Moldy Bulborb and Albino Dwarf Bulborb don't have bigger variants in this game, which saves us some time for now. That said, don't be surprised if more members of this family come up again soon. Now let's talk about the Greater Spotted Jellyfloat. The Greater Spotted Jellyfloat definitely deserves to rank higher than its lesser spotted counterpart due to its much higher health, ability to inhale more Pikmin at once, and even the player themselves. It does have one of the highest health wheels out of any enemies in the game, but much like the lesser spotted Jellyfloat, its biggest weakness is facing up against ice Pikmin. Those Pikmin will freeze the Greater Spotted Jellyfloat, which will cause it to drop to the ground and shatter immediately. Another enemy that's hard to rank is the Icy Blowhog, a very similar enemy to the Puffy Blowhog. The Icy Blowhog is the same size and has the same amount of health as its Puffy counterpart. However, the reason the Icy Blowhog ranks much higher is because it's actually harmful to the Pikmin. While the Puffy Blowhog's breath can stun the Pikmin and wilt their flowers, the Icy Blowhog's breath is much colder and freezes Pikmin in their tracks. Freezing the Pikmin is not the worst results, considering the player has ample time to unfreeze them with their whistle. Now we have the Pearly Clam Clamp. The Pearly Clam Clamp lies idly, waiting for the Pikmin to attack its core, at which point it'll clamp down and eat whatever's in its mouth. This makes the process of killing them with the Pikmin dangerous and time-consuming, especially in this game where these Clam Clamps have twice as much health as they did in previous ones. Alternatively, the Pearly Clam Clamps can be destroyed using rock bombs, provided you have them with you at the right time. While it may be somewhat basic in terms of attack pattern, the Pearly Clam Clamps are quite powerful and potentially deadly. The Wallyhop belly flops into the next spot. As you may have guessed, these creatures are relatives of the yellow Wallyhops, which more or less act the same. The Wallyhops are much stronger than their taller cousins, withstanding much more damage and having faster movements diagonally. The Wallyhops tend to stay in dark places like caves due to their skin being sensitive to sunlight. While you won't run into them as often as some other enemies, a bad encounter can leave quite a few Pikmin crushed, literally and emotionally, so be careful. Told you not to be surprised, the Whip-Tongue Bulborb is up. While this is another member of the Grubdog family, the Whip-Tongue Bulborb differentiates itself from the crowd with its long tongue, as its name would suggest. This tongue proves to be much more efficient than the regular Bulborb's mouth, as it covers a lot more range when consuming Pikmin. On top of its tongue, the Whip-Tongue Bulborb does have a high health wheel, making it harder to take down than the previous Bulborbs. Although, spoiler, it still may not be the most powerful Bulborb in the game's roster. As efficient as a sticky tongue is, the Toady Bloister proves that sticky tentacles can be just as useful. Slow, sluggish creatures that creep around on the ground, the Toady Bloister extends its tentacles out to catch Pikmin as soon as they enter its range. On top of that, the Toady Bloister has a protective outer shell which prevents it from being swarmed by Pikmin or stunned by Ochi. Its only weak point is the round object stemming from its back, which the Pikmin have to be thrown onto in order to damage it. The Toady Bloister may be slow, but be sure to stay behind it as it can eliminate multiple Pikmin at once if you're not careful. Now it's time to finally meet the parents of the Aristocrab offspring, that being the Peckish Aristocrab. Much like the Bulborbs when compared to their dwarf variants, there's not much to say about the Peckish Aristocrab as it's almost exactly the same as its younger version, the obvious differences being their health, size, and range, which of course contribute greatly to their overall power. The Aristocrab offspring also hides itself in the ground sometimes, which the Peckish Aristocrab does not do, so that's a minor detail. Speaking of enemies with smaller, weaker versions, it's time to talk about the Giant Breadbug. Much like the regular Breadbug, the Giant Breadbug forgoes attacking Pikmin itself in favor of stealing their treasure. The Giant Breadbug will charge at the player's army, but it'll only knock down everything in its path and wilt the Pikmin's flowers. Its giant size makes it harder for the player to throw enemies on top of the Giant Breadbug, thus you'll need to throw 10 yellow Pikmin on it to do any damage. The other and more effective way of dealing with it is by slamming the Giant Breadbug into the ship when the Pikmin bring the treasure back. The Giant Breadbug can drag Pikmin to their deaths, but as long as you have enough troops for the job, you'll come out on top. We're back in Bulborb territory again, this time with the simply named Orange Bulborb. The darkest and arguably creepiest member of the Grubdog family, the Orange Bulborb acts very similarly to the regular Bulborb, with a few small differences. First off, while the regular Bulborbs will remain unconscious until they're attacked, the Orange Bulborb is a much lighter sleeper and will wake up as soon as the player enters their vicinity. This makes it harder to sneak up and position yourself behind the Orange Bulborb, which is the ideal method of taking down these beasts. In addition to all that, the Orange Bulborb has higher health than the regular Bulborb, so even taking the difference in sleep patterns away, the Orange Bulborb will put up much more of a tussle. But not quite as much of a fight as the Spotty Bulbear, who takes the next spot. While the Spotty Bulbear is a bit of a heavier sleeper than the Orange Bulborb, a lot of the time you won't find it sleeping at all. The Spotty Bulbear often marches around certain areas followed by Dwarf Bulbears, making them the most alert Grubdogs in those instances. On top of their high health and alertness, the Spotty Bulbear is also notable for being able to eat Pikmin at a much faster pace than other Bulborbs. This makes it entirely possible to lose a large portion of your army in one encounter, so definitely be on high alert with these monstrous creatures around. Plenty of these enemies have appeared in previous games, but one that has had arguably the biggest redesign is the Creeping Chrysanthemum. A stealthy enemy that pretends to be a flower, the Creeping Chrysanthemum Chrysanthemum in this game looks like a frog that has flowers for eyes and a mouth on top of its body. The Creeping Chrysanthemum will chomp at enemies that are in its direct line of sight, so much like the Bulborbs, it's best to attack these things in their backs. The Creeping Chrysanthemum's high health can make them quite the hassle to take care of, especially if they successfully use the element of surprise. The Creeping Chrysanthemum does have a more powerful variant in this game, that being the Startle Spore. Instead of flowers, Startle Spores disguise themselves by pretending to be mushrooms until the player gets close. The Startle Spore is the same size, attack pattern, health, and strategy as the Creeping Chrysanthemum, so why is it ranking higher? The answer is its tongue, which spits out poison whenever the Startling Spore opens its mouth. It's true that white Pikmin are immune to poison, but considering they're kind of weaker Pikmin and the Startle Spore has a lot of health, this fight will be tough even with a lot of them in your army. The Startle Spore and Creeping Chrysanthemum look innocuous on the surface, but the same can't be said about the Fiery Bulblax. As you can probably tell, the Fiery Bulblax burns brightly and will set any Pikmin that aren't red ablaze no matter which part of the body they touch. The only way any non-red Pikmin can attack it is if the Fiery Bulblax enters water, which eliminates the fire until they step out of it again. The Fiery Bulblax has very high health and can be quite dangerous in multiple circumstances, which is why they're ranking quite high on this countdown. Now, if two sizes just weren't enough, Pikmin 4 introduced an all-new variation of Grubdog known as the Jumbo Bulborb. Similar to its smaller counterparts in pretty much every way, the Jumbo Bulborb's high health does make it amongst the toughest enemies in the game. They're also never seen sleeping, unlike the regular Bulborb, which makes them closer to the Dwarf Bulborb in that regard. Perhaps we'll see Jumbo versions of the other enemies in future installments of the Pikmin series, but for now, the Jumbo Bulborb stands as the toughest non-boss member of the Grubdog family in Pikmin 4. Narrowly missing the top 3 is the Bloomcap Bloister. While the Bloomcap Bloister does have the same general slow movement as the Toady Bloister, the amount of time it takes to devour Pikmin is much lower due to its faster tentacle speed. The best course of action, once again, is to position yourself behind the Bloomcap Bloister and throw Pikmin on its stem, especially the purple Pikmin if they're in your army. Bloomcap Bloister's high attack speed, strong outer shell, and high health does make it one of the most powerful enemies in the game, but not quite enough to get a medal. A creature that is getting a nice bronze medal though is the Snowflake Fluttertail. Probably the most powerful enemy that can fly or use elemental powers, the Snowflake Fluttertail seems to have taken cues from other enemies and used those abilities to their best potential. The Snowflake Fluttertail can freeze the Pikmin by flapping its wings at a very fast pace, which can be detrimental to all but ice Pikmin. However, if your army is full of ice Pikmin, the Snowflake Fluttertail can also swoop down and snatch them up before eating them. The high health of the Snowflake Fluttertail is a huge part of the reason it's ranking so high, but there is a method that can hobble them significantly. Throwing a red Pikmin with a fire starter onto the Snowflake Fluttertail will cause its cold exterior to melt, leaving it open to attacks from non-ice Pikmin. The Grub Chucker takes home the silver medal. One of the tallest general enemies to ever appear in a Pikmin game, the Grub Chucker is a large crustaceous creature which wanders around and grabs Pikmin with its claws. Upon doing so, the Grub Chucker throws a Pikmin into its mouth, which in this case happens to be the top of its body. While it does take a little bit of time for it to digest the Pikmin, the Grub Chucker can more than manage this due to its incredibly high health and the fact that the Pikmin will have to reach its body by climbing its legs. The Grub Chucker absolutely deserves to grab its claws in the silver medal for all those reasons. With all that ground covered, the gold medal for the most powerful non-boss enemy in Pikmin 4 is going to the Mammoth Snootwhacker. We talked way earlier about how the miniature Snootwhacker's ranking was hobbled by its inability to directly harm the Pikmin, or player. Due to its size, this is not a problem for the Mammoth Snootwhacker, which can crush enemies with its large snout. Beyond that, the Mammoth Snootwhacker's size also allows it to reach a larger range even with its regular blowing attack. The only way to harm this enemy at all is by having Oatchi ram into it twice, making it the only enemy in the game where a single impact from the dog won't work. Your best bet is to use Rock Pikmin as they're invulnerable to being crushed. Given the Mammoth Snootwhacker's incredibly thick skin, high health, and overall efficiency, there was no general enemy that deserved the gold medal more than this one.